Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. The city skyline gleamed in the early morning light, a symbol of humanity's progress and resilience. The Avengers, Earth's mightiest protectors, had just completed a routine patrol. There hadn't been a serious threat for weeks, and while some took comfort in the lull, others felt a sense of unease. Peace, for them, often meant the calm before a storm. Captain Ethan Cole, leader of the Avengers, stood on the balcony of their tower headquarters, watching the sun rise. Beside him, Mia Santiago, known for her mystic abilities, meditated in silence, sensing the energies that flowed through the city. Below, the streets were bustling with life, unaware of the shadows that loomed just beyond the horizon. "Something's coming," Mia whispered, her eyes narrowing. Ethan glanced at her, his brow furrowing. "You sense something?" Mia nodded slowly. "It's faint, but it's there, a disturbance in the energy, something dark, ancient, and malevolent." Before Ethan could respond, the ground beneath them trembled. A shock wave rippled through the city, and in the distance, a plume of dark smoke spiraled into the sky. Without hesitation, the Avengers mobilized. Within moments, they were on their way to the source of the explosion, the tension between them palpable. Arriving at the scene, they found chaos. Buildings were reduced to rubble, streets cracked open, and civilians ran in all directions, panic etched on their faces. In the center of the destruction stood three figures, once their friends, now twisted versions of themselves. David Jensen, the team's tech genius, was the first to recognize them. "Is that Alex, Julia, and Marcus?" His voice wavered as he stared at the dark, corrupted versions of his teammates. Alex, once the embodiment of strength and courage, now stood as a hulking figure of pure malice, his eyes glowing with an unnatural red hue. Julia, whose speed and agility were unmatched, moved with a predatory grace, her once bright aura now replaced by shadows that clung to her like a second skin. And Marcus, the calm strategist, radiated a dark energy that pulsed with malevolent intent. "They're different," Ethan muttered, gripping his shield tighter. "Corrupted," Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can feel it. Something Asamiania has twisted them into these dark versions of themselves." Without warning, the corrupted Avengers attacked. Alex charged forward, his strength amplified beyond recognition. He slammed into Ethan, sending him flying across the street and crashing into a car. Julia darted toward David, her movements a blur as she delivered a series of rapid, brutal strikes. Marcus, with a wave of his hand, unleashed a wave of dark energy that shattered the ground beneath Mia, forcing her to conjure a protective shield to avoid being crushed. "Pull back," Ethan shouted as he struggled to his feet. "We need to regroup." The Avengers retreated, their hearts heavy with the realization that their former comrades were now their enemies. As they regrouped in a nearby alley, Mia's hands trembled. "I've never felt power like this," she admitted. "It's ancient, dark, and overwhelming." "Whatever's controlling them, it's not of this world." "We need to figure out what happened," Ethan said, his voice firm despite the weight of the situation. "David, can you get us any data on that energy signature?" David, nursing a bruise on his cheek, nodded and began tapping away on his portable device. His fingers moved swiftly across the screen, gathering information as quickly as he could. "There's a trace of an unknown energy signature, but it's mixed with something else. Something technological. It's a blend of magic and science." Mia's eyes widened. "That's why it feels so foreign." "It's not just magic, it's something more. We're dealing with an enemy that knows both sides of the equation." Ethan clenched his jaw. "We need to find out who's behind this." But before they could come up with a plan, the ground shook again. The corrupted Avengers were on the move, wreaking havoc on the city, and the Avengers knew they couldn't wait any longer. The battle stretched into the evening as the Avengers tried to contain their former teammates, but every attack, every strategy, seemed to fall short. The corrupted Avengers were stronger, faster, and more ruthless than ever before. Their knowledge of the Avengers' strengths and weaknesses made them nearly unstoppable. As night fell, the Avengers found themselves at a crossroads. They had barely managed to keep the corrupted Avengers at bay, but they couldn't hold them off forever. Ethan paced back and forth, his frustration mounting. "We're out of options. We can't keep fighting them like this." Mia, sitting cross-legged on the floor, meditated, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I've been searching the energies. I think I've found something. There's a trail faint, but it's there. If we follow it, we might be able to find the source of the corruption." David nodded. "If we can get to the source, maybe we can reverse the process and bring them back." The decision was made. The Avengers would follow the trail, hoping to find the mastermind behind the attack and a way to save their friends. But as they prepared to leave, the city was rocked by another explosion. The corrupted Avengers had taken their destructive rampage to a new level, targeting the city's power grid. Darkness spread across the skyline as the lights went out, plunging the city into chaos. Ethan's heart sank. "We don't have much time." With Mia leading the way, they followed the energy trail through the darkened streets, moving swiftly and silently. The trail led them to an old, abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city, hidden beneath layers of enchantments and cloaking technology. It was a fortress, protected by magic and science, blending the two in ways the Avengers had never seen before. "This is it," Mia whispered, her voice filled with both awe and dread. "The source of the corruption is here." As they entered the factory, they were met with a labyrinth of corridors, each one more foreboding than the last. The walls pulsed with dark energy, and the air was thick with malevolent intent. The deeper they went, the more they could feel the weight of the power that had corrupted their friends. Finally, they reached the heart of the Factoria, a vast chamber filled with machines that hummed with dark energy. At the center of it all stood a figure cloaked in shadow, their face obscured but their presence undeniable. "The mastermind behind the attack." "I've been expecting you," the figure said, their voice dripping with malice. "Did you really think you could stop me?" Ethan stepped forward, his shield raised. "We'll do whatever it takes to stop you and free our friends." The figure chuckled darkly. "Your friends are beyond saving. They belong to me now, and soon, so will the rest of your precious Earth." Mia, her hands glowing with magic, stepped beside Ethan. "We'll see about that." The dark figure's words hung in the air, their voice filled with confidence and contempt. Ethan could feel the tension mounting, but he kept his stance firm, gripping his shield tighter. Mia's hands crackled with energy, her magic ready to be unleashed at a moment's notice. David remained in the background, his eyes scanning the dark machinery, looking for any weakness in the system. "We've faced worse than you," Ethan said calmly, his voice steady. "Whatever power you have over our friends, we'll break it." The figure tilted their head slightly, as if amused by the defiance. "You think this is about power? This is about vengeance, Captain. Your friends aren't fighting for me, they're fighting because they've realized the truth. They've seen the world for what it really is. They know now that you've been holding them back." At that moment, the doors behind them slammed shut, sealing the Avengers inside the chamber. From the shadows, the corrupted Avengers emerged, their eyes glowing with a cold, malevolent light. Alex, Julia, and Marcus stepped forward, their movements eerily synchronized, as though they were one mind, one dark force. "You can't win this fight," the figure continued, their voice echoing through the chamber. "Not when your enemies know your every move. They are you, and you are them. The longer you resist, the more you doom yourselves." Ethan swallowed the knot in his throat. He didn't want to believe it, but the truth was undeniable. His friends, his teammates, were lost to this darkness, and they fought with an intimate knowledge of his team's strategies. But there had to be a way to break through to them, to remind them of who they really were. Mia's voice was low, almost inaudible. "They're still in there. I can feel it. Their real selves are trapped beneath the corruption." Ethan nodded. "Then we hold them off until we can bring them back." With that, the battle erupted. Alex charged forward with his usual brute strength, but it was amplified now, more vicious, more focused. Ethan barely had time to block the oncoming blow, his shield vibrating under the impact. David scrambled to take cover, his tech skills no match for Julia's speed, as she darted toward him in a blur. Mia unleashed a wave of energy to keep Marcus at bay, but his dark power pushed against her defenses, cracking the ground beneath their feet. The room seemed to vibrate with the intensity of the fight. Sparks flew from shattered machinery, and the air was thick with the sound of clashing powers and the grunts of battle. Ethan fought with everything he had, but for every strike he landed, Alex retaliated with twice the force. Julia's speed was overwhelming, and David was barely able to dodge her flurry of attacks, trying to come up with a solution that didn't involve harming his friend. It was Mia who saw the opening first. Amid the chaos, she noticed the faint flicker in Marcus's eye. A hesitation, a sliver of doubt. It was brief, but it was there, a sign that he was still fighting the dark force inside him. She focused her energy, sending a pulse of light toward him, hoping to exploit that moment of weakness. The light hit Marcus squarely in the chest, and for a split second, his dark aura faltered. He stumbled back, clutching his head, as though battling the darkness that had taken hold of him. "Marcus," Mia called out, her voice desperate. "You're stronger than this. Fight it." But the dark figure was quick to react. With a wave of their hand, Marcus's eyes glazed over once more, and he resumed his attack, the moment of clarity lost. Mia cursed under her breath, her frustration mounting. It was clear now that this was more than just a battle of strength. They needed to break the connection between the mastermind and their friends. Otherwise, they would be trapped in this endless loop, fighting their own teammates forever. David, who had been dodging Julia's relentless strikes, suddenly had an idea. He ducked behind a piece of debris, his fingers flying across the small console he had managed to pull from his belt. He was scanning the dark energy signatures, comparing them with the tech signatures in the room. His eyes lit up as he found what he was looking for, an energy node embedded in the machinery at the far end of the chamber. "Ethan!" David shouted, his voice strained. "There's a control node near the back of the room. If we can destroy it, we might be able to sever the connection." Ethan didn't hesitate. "Cover me!" Mia and David unleashed everything they had, their combined magic and tech creating a barrage of attacks to distract the corrupted Avengers. Ethan charged toward the node, ducking and weaving between strikes, using every ounce of his skill and reflexes to avoid the onslaught. As he reached the node, he raised his shield high and brought it down with all his might. The impact was explosive. The node shattered, sending a wave of energy rippling through the chamber. The dark aura surrounding the corrupted Avengers flickered, and for the first time since the battle began, there was a moment of stillness. Alex, Julia, and Marcus paused, their eyes wide, as though waking from a deep nightmare. They blinked, confusion and pain crossing their faces as they looked around the room, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But the victory was short-lived. The dark figure, now fully visible and standing at the center of the chamber, let out a low, menacing laugh. "You think you've won?" This was only the beginning. With a flick of their wrist, the ground beneath them trembled once more. From the shattered machinery, dark tendrils of energy erupted, wrapping around Alex, Julia, and Marcus, pulling them toward the figure. Their bodies convulsed as the dark power surged through them again, stronger than before. The figure raised their hands, and the energy intensified, twisting and warping the corrupted Avengers even further. "No!" Ethan shouted, rushing forward, but it was too late. The corrupted Avengers were lifted off the ground, their bodies completely engulfed by the dark energy. When they landed, they were no longer the same. Their forms had changed, their powers amplified to terrifying levels. They were no longer merely corrupted, they had become avatars of pure darkness, under the complete control of the mastermind. The figure's voice echoed through the chamber. "Now, you face my true power. And this time, there will be no escape." Ethan stood his ground, his heart pounding in his chest. His friends were gone, lost to the darkness. But he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. "Mia, David," he said, his voice low and steady. "We take them down." Together, the battle resumed with a fury unlike anything they had faced before. Alex, Julia, and Marcus were relentless, their attacks infused with the dark energy that radiated from the figure at the center. Every blow sent shock waves through the room, and every strike the Avengers landed seemed to be absorbed by the dark power that now controlled their friends. But Ethan refused to back down. He fought with everything he had, pushing his body to the limit, his mind focused on one goal: breaking through the darkness and bringing his friends back. Mia and David fought by his side, their own exhaustion forgotten as they poured every ounce of their strength into the fight. It was Mia who finally saw the opportunity. Amid the chaos, she had been watching the flow of dark energy, studying its movements. She realized that the dark figure wasn't just controlling the corrupted Avengers, that they were drawing power from them. If they could sever that connection, they might be able to weaken the figure enough to take them down. "Mia!" David shouted as he struggled to fend off Julia's attacks. "Do it now!" Mia didn't hesitate. She gathered all the energy she had left, focusing it into a single point, and then released it in a blinding wave of light. The light surged through the chamber, cutting through the dark tendrils that connected the figure to the corrupted Avengers. For the first time, the dark figure recoiled, their control over the corrupted Avengers weakening. Alex, Julia, and Marcus faltered, their dark forms flickering as the connection was broken. Ethan seized the opportunity, delivering a powerful blow to the figure, his shield crackling with energy as it struck. The dark figure let out a scream of rage and pain as the connection was severed completely. The corrupted Avengers collapsed to the ground, the dark energy dissipating from their bodies. They were free. But the fight wasn't over. The dark figure, though weakened, wasn't defeated yet. They raised their hands, summoning one final surge of power, ready to unleash it upon the Avengers. But before they could, Mia, David, and Ethan combined their remaining strength, launching a coordinated attack that overwhelmed the figure. The dark energy shattered, and the figure collapsed, defeated. The chamber fell silent, the dark energy slowly dissipating into the air. The battle was over. Ethan, breathing heavily, looked around at his team. Alex, Julia, and Marcus were slowly regaining consciousness, their faces filled with confusion and pain, but they were themselves again. The darkness had been lifted. "We did it," Mia whispered, her voice filled with exhaustion and relief. Ethan nodded, his heart heavy but filled with a sense of hope. They had won, but the scars of the battle would remain. Their friends were free, but the cost had been high. As they helped their teammates to their feet, Ethan glanced at the now empty space where the dark figure had once stood. He knew this wasn't the end. The forces that had manipulated them were still out there, waiting in the shadows. But for now, they had a moment of peace, and they would rebuild, stronger than before. The Avengers had faced the darkness and they had emerged victorious.